Okay, we're here today with Karabi Acharya, who is a senior director of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and another of our leaders in moving towards well-being oriented policy and thinking. Thank you so much, Karabi, for making time to chat with me today. You have embraced and developed this idea of well-being quite deeply, and I'm wondering how you first got involved or interested in the idea, the language, and in thinking this is actually the thing to spend your time on.
At one level, I mean, there's nothing new about this in a lot of ways, right? We do understand, I think, most of us, that well-being is this broader, more holistic concept. And I would say for me personally, that inherent understanding came from the cultures in which I was brought up. I'm of mixed heritage. My father's from India. My mother is a white American. And I would say that there were two things that were really critical, in terms of that part of my story, in the connection to well-being. One is the recognition that there are many ways to understand the world, right? That sort of inherent sense that, the way that we do things here is not the only way to do them, right? Because in my household, we always had the American way and we had the Indian way, and sometimes they clashed, sometimes they didn't. But so just this idea that there's more than one way to thrive and to be well. And I think the other piece of that is, in India, health and well-being is extremely holistic in its conceptualization. And so to give you an example, the idea, if you are sick and you go to a doctor, in India, most doctors will tell you what you should and should not eat. And when I talk to friends of mine in the States from India, many of them are very frustrated that when they go to the doctor, they're given a prescription and nobody tells them what they should or shouldn't eat. But I've always known, as part of my own cultural upbringing, that health and well-being is not about the right drug or the right prescription. It is about so many other things. I mean, so that's always been part of it. I would say more recently, I lead the Global Ideas for U.S. Solutions team at RWJF. And part of what we do there is look abroad to understand how are other countries, other places achieving health and well-being, and what can we learn from those approaches. And as we started looking around to kind of look at what are the big trends, what are people talking about globally, well-being came up, right, as an area that that there was a lot of discussion about. I won't say many countries. Much of it started with Bhutan decades ago, but then has more recently been picked up by many countries in terms of well-being frameworks and measurement approaches. And so we really wanted to understand what was that all about.
Can you explain some of the key findings and conclusions from your work on narratives? And we could certainly direct viewers to the amazing resources that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has on that work.
I think that the more recent sort of narrative work builds on the recognition that measurement alone is not enough to create policy change and to create change on the ground. And some of the measurement work that we've been engaged with, for example, is trying to understand what are the stories that people tell about well-being, about what it means to flourish and to thrive. How is that conceptualized? So one of the things that we did, as I said, is we looked to see, does this concept of well-being resonate with people? And what does it really look like for different kinds of people? How are people thinking about it? And it goes back to what we started with, which is the word itself and the definition of the word itself. And so one of the things that RAND and Metropolitan Group did was they identified what they called 6 network connectors. So they did that, and then they also looked at some global examples of how has well-being been framed in other parts of the world, and what are the ways in which it has been sort of explained what are the stories that are being told. And then working with these US-based network connectors, they sort of ask the question, well, what resonates? What doesn't resonate? And the US-based leaders were all over this. They were incredibly excited about it, and they saw tremendous connections to their work. I think one of the places that got called out a little bit was that the work around well-being and the work around equity has often happened in parallel and not in conjunction with each other. And there's a real need to bring those two things together. Well-being often, can be seen as something that is only for the wealthy and only for sort of the elite. And that's where the word itself can run into problems, right, in terms of the connotations. And so some of these network connectors pointed that out to us and said that, this will not work for my constituency because they are focused on these other things. And yet others, other network connectors found that this was a way to conceptualize their work. So that's some of the things that we've been learning.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the ongoing well-being policy related initiatives at the foundation, or things that you're looking forward to working on in the future?
One thing that has been there from the beginning is trying to support conversations, exchanges, learning across borders, right? And helping to bring particularly US-based leaders into conversations with leaders from other parts of the world, and sort of helping these US-based folks to connect to and tap into the networks that are emerging, particularly in Europe, I would say. So that connection, and so recognizing that there is a larger global community and there is sort of a solidarity and learning opportunities with that. Another area is around really thinking, to your earlier point, of like, how do we make this practical? How do we actually, take it from this very high level abstract conceptualization to something that actually changes lives, on the ground? And there's, again, very interesting work coming out of Wales, where they have a tool that looks at the social value created from a particular investment. So you can look at the cost benefit, but you might also be able to look at the social value. It's still rough, it's still coming up, but I think those kinds of tools are incredibly exciting, because again, it takes it, as you were saying earlier, from this very broad, big idea to something that, changes budgets, changes policies, and things like that.